Jai Hind. A very good afternoon everyone and a warm welcome to this webinar. On behalf of NCC IT Bombay, I take privilege to be the moderator for this event. Shashwat Anand, Senior Under Officer at NCC. Today, it's a sheer pleasure to have Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain sir enlightening us on the issue of India, present and the way ahead. A brief background of the personality whom we all are here to listen to. Decorated with the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM bar, Hasnain sir served as the former military secretary of the Indian Army and commanded the Chinar Corps in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, bearing a splendid service record right from his commissioning in 4 Garhwal Rifles and commanding the unit into Operation Meghdoot in Siachen Glacier to commanding the 21 and the 15 Corps, former being the only strike corps of the Southern Command. Sir is presently Chancellor, Central University of Kashmir, and a dynamic personality fostering military intellectualism and strategic culture in our country. We are really honored to have you with us, sir. So before moving ahead, let me also introduce the guest panel that we have with us today. We are privileged to have Brigadier G.S. Cheema, sir, Group Commander, NCC Headquarters, Mumbai A. Colonel V.S. Bhave, Sena Medal. Sir is Deputy Group Commander, Mumbai A. Col S K Sadhasivan, Administrative Officer of 2 MER, the regiment which a unit falls in. We also have with us Arav Chawdharry, former NCC Cadet, an actor well known for his prominent role of Bheeshma in Mahabhara. Sir has been proactively spreading awareness on issues of national security amongst the film fraternity and inspiring the youth towards such issues. We are glad to have your association, sir. And finally, we have 10 shortlisted candidates selected from an overwhelming responses that came in hundreds, representing a diverse pool of thoughts. So an invigorating Q&A session is on the way. Now before we move ahead to the most awaited talk for today, may I request Brigadier G.S. Cheema sir to give an opening address for today's event. Sir.
Thank you, Shashwat. Jai Hind, sir. Permission to resume, sir.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this vibrant group of IITians and professionals from the entire spectrum of the youth of our country who are so well-read and determined to transform our country in more than one way. Today, I am doing the honors to deliver the keynote address or to say the commencement speech, and I am all the more privileged that the entire program is spearheaded by none other than General Hasnain, whom we look up to for so many reasons. Today's discussion on the webinar has been brought to you by the IIT Bombay and my group, that is Mumbai A. Frankly, I take the responsibility to come along with being the keynote speaker to set the course for today's interaction, to get the unusual perspective on the subject, that is where we are, the present and the way ahead, a macro picture of the challenges now, our allies, our adversaries, and the future. As we all are aware, India is on the cusp of a major transformation. Change has been in the making over past 5, 6, 7 years. The economy is trying to move out of the negative legacies of the past, especially the reckless credit expansion. India has regained its position as the fastest growing large economy in the world, which is highly commendable for all of us. However, to meet the rising aspirations of our youth population, we as a country need to achieve and sustain a high rate of GDP growth for the next 3 decades or so. There would be many drivers, I would say, to the strategy, like the growth, the generation of employment, labor reforms, technology and innovation, agriculture, and many more. To have this, we need to keep our focus on the infrastructure related issues, like how do we meet our energy requirements. This is on the periphery of the subject that we are dealing with, because I'm coming to the subject per se as to what we require. We require a very secure environment to attain what we intend to attain. So the roadmap set to achieve our goals in the next 3 decades can only be achieved in case we have a secure environment. So how do we achieve a conducive environment for a sustained growth for our nation to be a credible regional power in times to come? We need to assess as to where we stand as of today and find answers for the way forward. The national security is an important all-encompassing term that includes protection of the nation and the citizens from all range of multidimensional threats and coercion. The overwhelming scope of a strategy to deal with these threats in a fast evolving national and international landscape is a big challenge. What happened about a year back or 2 years back and what is happening now is totally diverse. So therefore, it's a fast evolving national and international landscape, which is a big challenge for the strategists and also for well-meaning Indians. We definitely live in an uneasy neighborhood towards our north and west, or I would say east also. We have unsettled borders, which could be a future flashpoint for conflict. Towards the far east, we have the problems of refugee influx, and towards the south is the Indian Ocean that is becoming an arena of strategic rivalry. There are continuing internal conflicts in various parts of our country, which is also playing up on the social media with the prospective danger of dividing communities. In due course, we would also deliberate upon our allies and types of help and the leveraging that may be important in the emerging scenarios, which is fast changing, both today as well as in future. We neither ignore the strength of the Indian growing power nor the difficulties that shackle us from achieving our real potential. We are living in a time of considerable uncertainty, but what is certain is that the choice which we make today could define a future place in the world. Each period in history comes with a unique set of challenges to the security risk that India faces today. We do not seek to dissect what has happened past in the history or dig into the past missteps. We look to the future to see as to how we could shape and build a safer and more prosperous India. And I'm glad that the youth of the country is forthcoming with such webinars and such ideas where the technology and the requirement of the forces can converge at a place to get an optimum power that the India needs. Hopefully, we would find some answers to some of the brilliant questions that would be coming up in your minds. We would endeavor to suggest certain ideas and solutions in the due course. May I now request General Syed Hasnain, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, Sena Medal and Bar 2 VSM to enlighten us with his thoughts on the subject. Sir.
Thank you, Brig Cheema. Thank you very much. Honored, absolutely, to be part of your program. May I request everyone to mute his mic? It will become much easier. The broadband will take on, the waves far better, and you'll probably be able to hear me much better. Whenever you have to speak, please unmute yourself and speak at that time. Actually, this is an honor for one major reason that I find the NCC, for which I have had a very deep regard, entering into an environment, into a sphere in which it has really not been involved. And I've sometimes wondered why it has not been involved. Obviously, it needs one good man to come and change things, and I'm glad that's exactly what is happening. And we hope that this kind of a program will have many more takers in the future, because one of my major complaints against my own nation is that we are a nation with a very, very poor strategic culture. We don't understand the various aspects of national security, and everything that this subject is really related to is actually national security. So I'm glad that a very, very good beginning seems to have been made, and my compliments to Cheema, to all of you, my uniformed fraternity here, all the young people, for having joined into such an effort. And at a premier institution, from a premier institution linking up together the NCC, a premier institution such as the IIT Mumbai, putting together a program like this is actually showing a model to many others who I hope will take a cue from this. Now, I'll jump into the subject because I've got about 40-45 minutes to speak, I hope, and then we will spend a lot of time on your questions. A subject such as this, you can't just dive into it. India present and way ahead. Normally, a speaker who's really not used to speaking on a subject such as this will dive straight into the subject and start speaking about what India is today. I'm not going to do that. I have a lot to speak about the backdrop, and which is what will make it much easier for us to be able to comprehend what lies in the future and how we have to overcome those challenges. We have to look at it not just from the Indian angle. You've got to look at it from the world point of view, an international fraternity, community point of view. We got to look at it from the neighborhood point of view. And we got to look at it from the extended neighborhood point of view. These are all terminologies which will keep coming up in the talk. Secondly, I do think that this subject is essentially a strategic subject. And therefore, it is connected comprehensively to national security. And therefore, when you have a subject of this nature, in fact, anything strategic at all, normally you will find that it should be divided out into different domains and to make it much easier to comprehend. I'm not going to structure the talk out in that manner, but what you will hear me speaking about is the political aspects of India, the social aspects, economic, diplomatic, military, and psychological. When you put all these 6 things together, you look at national security and you look at the nation as a whole. So there are very clear phases in the run up to 2020. I would divide it out as 1947 to 1962, 1963 to 1991, 1992 to 2020, and you can have sub phases in the middle, which I will divide them into as we go along. The first thing is to understand the meaning of national security. To my mind, what is national security? Every nation has got certain aspirations about itself, about its people, where at what level you are going to take your nation in the future at a particular given point in time. Everything that you do to ward off the threats which will prevent you from achieving your aspirations for the nation. All those things are essentially threats. Anything which will prevent you from reaching that are essentially threats. And all the measures that you undertake to ward off, neutralize those threats is actually national security. That's what national security is all about. It's essentially a means to make sure that your people can continue working and aspiring to see their nation grow to the levels they actually aspire to see it grow. That is essentially national security. So let me go back to 1947, 1962 very, very briefly. What was this period? It was a period of, I would say, strategic immaturity, because we were just young, very young as a nation. We really didn't know much of governance. We didn't know very much about international affairs. Our neighbor on the other side, Pakistan, was much worse. They had no idea of strategic maturity at all. So we didn't know. We took our decisions at that time based upon whatever perceptions existed in the leadership. The great thing that we have managed to achieve was we were a democracy. We were born as a democracy. We continue to remain a democracy in this period and beyond. We continue to do nation building in a big way. We managed to integrate the nation. I mean, the fascinating thing was Sardar Patel managed to achieve the integration of the Indian state. Was one of the greatest achievements internally that we could have ever had. We continue to follow the economic pattern of the socialist world. That was the worldview of the leadership at that time. We were aligned, not aligned, but inclined more towards the Soviet Union. We saw the socialist pattern. as something which will probably do greater benefit to India, and we did not agree with the capitalist model of economics or of politics, etc. We remained non-aligned. We said we will not become a part of any other bloc. We were one of the leaders of the non-aligned world. In fact, the non-aligned movement was started at the behest of our country. The Cold War was on at this time. We did not take sides, as you're aware, being non-aligned, but at certain points in time, we did incline to be linked to certain countries like the Soviet Union. We had to for our particular reasons. 1962, we had a major setback. In international relations, our inability to handle China, our inability to understand China at that time, paid us very dearly subsequently, and in which we had to suffer a major ignominy of a defeat in 1962, and that affected the psyche of the nation. It affected the psyche of the leadership, the nation itself, and of the armed forces in a very big way, because we were not certain about handling China. Just as you'll see, we are slightly tentative about handling China even today, although we are much, much more confident. So I'll sum up, and of course, this is a time when we started investing in some good things. One of the very good things we invested in was your institution, the IITs, the Indian Institutes of Technology, because it was recognized very early enough that technology would make the difference in the world. And we instituted well. We set up world-class institutions. Only thing was they got restricted to just a few in number, and we somehow did not take this pan-India to look at education in a bigger way, higher quality of education in a bigger way. I think I would sum up that period as something not rising to the potential. India did not rise to its potential in this period up to 1962 at all, and got a major setback because of the war in 62. Nehru died 2 years later. The leadership was left floundering after that. Let me look at the period of 63 to 1991. In this period, there were three clear phases: 1963 to 71, 1971 to 1984. That's the death of Indira Gandhi, and 1985 to 1991. That's the period of Rajiv Gandhi, give or take a little. We continue to remain in the socialist camp. We still did not move out. The Cold War was still very much on at that time. 1965 war was thrust upon us. We didn't win the war. It was a stalemate. We can debate and argue that we won the war. Pakistan did not win it either, though they celebrate 6th of September as Victory Day, etc. They never won the war. It was just that Pakistan exploited the situation post-1962. We needn't go into the details of it or sometime. Otherwise, it's a very, very interesting thing to study this period of 1962 to 1965. This is also the period in 1970. In fact, 1966 was a period in which we had a near famine. We came out of that. We were being supported by the United States through a program called PN 480, which gave us enough food grain to survive. We overcame that, and we became self-sufficient in food. Atmanirbharta at that time. Self-sufficiency in food was a very, very big thing. Besides that, of course, we won the 1971 war. We defeated Pakistan. We divided Pakistan. As a result, one major flank of ours got fairly secure, I would say 80% secure. Bangladesh is a friendly country, but there can be problems here and there. So we have to keep that with a pinch of salt. But 80% definitely we created a greater security for ourselves. After 71, the major landmark was 1974, when we did the first nuclear test and got onto the path of nuclearization. It also put Pakistan on the path of nuclearization. Actually, it was a response to China that we carried out the test, but we were not sufficiently sensitive enough to be able to convince Pakistan that this was never intended against Pakistan. But Pakistan came somehow took it in that manner as a major threat, and they also started the program. And that's why today we find ourselves as two nuclear armed neighbors. And this is a time when China started rising. The Cultural Revolution was over. 1978 came Deng Xiaoping, and you had the four modernizations. and the four famous modernizations of agriculture, industry, technical education, and the armed forces. This is something which anyone who's studying strategic affairs today needs to go back to 1978 and understand the start point of the rise of China. Pakistan, this period was also characterized by Pakistan's avowed intent to take revenge for 1971, and they were looking for it. They got the opportunity very early, and in 1989, they commenced their activities in Jammu and Kashmir. We virtually gave it to them on a plate. Once again, primarily because of the weakness of the center at that time, 1989, if you remember, the center was extremely weak. The Rajiv Gandhi government had fallen, and we had the VP Singh government, and we had also, I think, one other government which came at that time. And ultimately, till 1991, we had fair amount of political instability in the center. Economically, we were very weak. We were coming down to $1 billion of foreign exchange reserves. Compare that today to $510 billion that are there in your coffers today. And somehow we could not understand the rise of China. We continued to believe through the 90s, in the early part of the millennium, that it was essentially Pakistan which was our adversary on the ground. We should have been able to put up enough effort to modernize our armed forces, to be able to act as, if nothing else, a dissuasion to China if we were not being able to achieve deterrence. But somehow we ignored this and continued to put all the eggs into one basket as far as Pakistan was concerned. And China continued to rise and created a mismatch and a symmetry between military capability of China and India. It was also the time when in the 80s when Pakistan used Punjab as the testing ground. And that is why the obsession with insurgency, terrorism started from the 80s, and it has not ended till now. 40 years we have been into counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism. Forget the Northeast. The Northeast itself has got such a huge challenge. But look at what was happening in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. The jihadi approach of Pakistan to try and divide India, to try and force exploitation of India's fault lines, and India's fault lines are many, which you have to remember always. You have to remember that we have got religious fault lines, we have got casteist fault lines, we have got ethnic and linguistic and regional caste fault lines. And our adversaries will always take advantage of this if we do not rise to the occasion, as your group commander just said, unless you resolve these problems internally, set them aside, and realize that it is the development and the strengthening of the nation which is your complete intent and your aim. And this can't happen if you remain divided. So the economy was so weak in 1991 that we had to finally change our complete approach. And that's when the coming of Manmohan Singh made a difference. Narasimha Rao's government at that time in 1991 to 1996. And globalization hit the world. We started approaching globalization, but very creepingly, very, very creepingly. We didn't jump into it. We didn't dive into it the way China did. China created a marvel, 14% growth at one time. We remained pegged at 8-9% growth. China could average 10% growth at particular times, but they jumped up even up to 14% growth. In 1986 or 85 saw the coming of Rajiv Gandhi, 84, 85, and also the his combination with General Sundarji, K. Sundarji. This is the time when we gave the technological trigger to India. In fact, much of the IT achievements of the later years could probably be traced back to this period. Much of the modernization of the army, which didn't take place in sufficient quantities, actually can be traced back to this period. In those 2 years and 4 months that General Sundarji had at his disposal, he is the one who actually gave a doctrinal impetus to the Indian Army and to the Indian Armed Forces. In general, the technicalization of the armed forces, the technicalization of India, all this was primarily given by Sundarji. Middle, we had unfortunate things like our expeditionary adventurism in Sri Lanka, which came to a knot at that particular time. From 1992 to 2020, in which I divide out this very important period of 2014 to 2020, economics became the mantra from 1992. The whole world was looking at economics. It was a revamp which was going on. globalization, as I told you, the IT revolution hit the world. The world became flat in nature. If you read many of the books of this period, written by some great scholars, they will all speak to you about the world. The world is flat completely. That was the IT revolution taking place. There was a revamp in the Indo-US relationship. Of course, the Soviet Union had broken up by that time. The Cold War was over, but our relationship with the United States started very tentatively. We didn't go the whole hog, and then there was a halt in between in 1998 when India went nuclear. In 2001, the global war on terror started. We were the first sufferers of international terrorism, transnational terrorism, but somehow, you see, unless you're comprehensively strong as a nation, the world, the international community doesn't listen to you. And we were not able to convince the world that we were the biggest sufferers of international terror, and that all our complaints internationally against Pakistan fell on deaf ears. It's only when the United States got hit by 9/11 that you suddenly found the global war on terror coming. And we were in the center of it because it was all happening in Afghanistan, it was happening in Pakistan, and the effects of that were traveling to us quite obviously. Now, very, very important aspect of this period is that fact that the neighborhood, our neighborhood, with anyone's neighborhood, when you are a subcontinental sized nation, your neighborhood makes a lot of difference. So Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Pakistan, Afghanistan. I mean, this is your near abroad region. It makes a huge difference. Somehow in our enthusiasm to develop as a nation, we couldn't take the neighborhood along. And particularly because of Pakistan, because we set up the vehicle of SAARC, South Asia Regional Cooperation, but somehow it could not take off because of the impediments that Pakistan kept putting into it. It's only with the coming of Mr. Modi that later we started looking at BIMSTEC instead of looking at SAARC so much, to axe out Pakistan, and so that it does not sort of act as a weight to pull us down or pull us back all the time. So this was a major failure on our part, and this is something which we will have to keep in mind in the future. It's been exploited tremendously by China. From 1992 to 2008, China was still benign. It was absolutely benign. It was growing very strongly. Its armed forces were growing very strongly, but from about 2005 onwards, its actions started reflecting on what it was wanting for the future. And 2008 onwards, particularly when it started denying visas for people from Jammu and Kashmir, for example, or giving a punch to visas, denying a visa to our army commander, Northern Army commander at that time. 2011, starting the walk-in or creep-in operations in Chumar, Eastern Ladakh, and those particular areas. All this should have given us enough indicators. We were studying it very seriously. We had put up a China study group at that time and was reading it. We had a lot of sinologists who were reading all this, but it was very difficult to predict which way China was going. Later on, of course, Mr. Modi adopted a very, I would say, a correct approach of dealing with China in two dimensions. That is, economically cooperating completely and making sure that on the geopolitical side, we kept thwarting China or its attempts to try and dominate in different parts of the world. This is the time, 2013 is the exact period. So that's why I'm not stepping into 2014. 2013 was the time when China came out with this great initiative called the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which forms a part of it. The essence of this corridor was that they wanted to circumvent the Indian Ocean. They didn't want to allow the Indian domination of the Indian Ocean, or the combined domination of India and the United States and Japan and Australia to dominate the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific region. They wanted to make sure that the Malacca did not act like an obstacle, and to somehow have a different means by which communications from mainland China to the areas of the Northwest Indian Ocean could take place from the Chinese mainland. So the BRI became one of its major things, and India was one of the few nations and one of the major nations which resisted it. It ensured it did not attend any of those meetings which were called for, and this is a major sticking point between India and China. So also I think at this time, in this period, a tremendous improvement in intelligence did take place, although a lot of people will accuse me of saying that how did the intelligence improvement take place if we could not discover Kargil in 1999? It's post-Kargil I'm talking about. Or in 2020, when how come we did not discover the Chinese transgressions in these areas, etc. But despite that, my contention primarily is that India was kept free of terror attacks from about 2008 till 2020, except for the major terror attacks which took place in Jammu and Kashmir, Uri, Nagrota, Pathankot, etc., which took place. Those are related more to the Jammu and Kashmir proper. But by and large, after Mumbai, we have not had a major terror attack in India. So that brings me to 2014, 2020, the crucial period that we're looking at as the base. And this is the period of the coming of the NDA 1 government. Actually, that's the NDA 2 government. I call this the NDA 3 government because NDA 1 was really saying Mr. Vajpayee's government. But we just call it the Modi government, Modi 1. The coming of Modi 1 in 2014. The coming of Modi 1 actually was characterized by the fact that for about 3 or 4 years prior to 2014, there was a paralysis of governance in India, virtually. And there is no reason why this should have happened, but because of the corruption cases, because of the Commonwealth Games issue, the 2G issue, and all kinds of things like that, there was a paralysis in governance. We had hardly any improvement in our defense capability. There was no decision making. You had defense ministers who had been there for long but could not take decisions and could not do the correct allocations to us. So it overall, comprehensively, those 4 years set the stage for the coming of the Modi government. Now, what immediately happened from the 26th of May 2014 was that there was a sudden energization of governance, no doubt about it, a sudden energization of governance. And I'm looking at this complete period from 14 to 2020, the 6 years. We started having dreams of a $5 trillion economy. At least you could sit back and dream about it. We had achieved 2 trillion, we had achieved more than 2 trillion, and we were looking at achieving 3 trillion. We are aware that the United States is a $21 trillion economy. We are aware that China is a $13 to $14 trillion economy. Much higher is defense expenditure is almost 4.5 or 5 times that of India. So, but despite that, a tremendous energization of governance took place. We found in all the domains, social, political, military, psychological, economic, everything had a touch given to it. And you found new programs, new innovative programs coming out. I mean, the simplest of those programs was something like Swachh Bharat, which had never really been undertaken in a revolutionary way. Its effect may not have been transformational, but at least generationally, it started making a difference. And hopefully, in the next 15, 20 years, you'll find, as the generations change, you'll find people coming out with greater sensitization towards a program such as Swachh Bharat. Other programs such as the Ayush program, which is a tremendous thing on the medical infrastructure of India, or at least the medical capability. It's not come to such a great assistance in the COVID crisis, but that is not meant for a pandemic. It was meant for a different kind of medical environment. But I think the biggest thing which came with the government in 2014 was the Make in India program. And the fillip which was given to military modernization, the whole idea of acquisitions, the defense procurement program, the DPP, the defense procurement procedures were revamped. A lot of people were thinking that you're going to achieve everything in 3 years. And I was always sure about it, that this kind of thing takes time. You have to, if you want transformation, you have to take out from the root what has been existing as in terms of the inability to function as a nation in governance. You have to take out the old system from the roots, and you got to transplant a completely new system. It's going to take time. And therefore, I would tell people, don't ever get disappointed with not having achieved something transformational in a Make in India program. We've achieved a lot already. Let me tell you, we've done a lot of decentralization in terms of the financial management towards modernization and things like that. The second very major thing which happened was a fresh approach to national security, a proactive approach towards Pakistan in particular. And let me tell you, Mr. Modi approached this issue in a very sensible way. In the first 1.5 years, he did not even look at Pakistan. He was interested more in going around the world, building bridges with the West Asia, other countries. The international front and the international picture was made very clear in his own mind, and India's position in that world was perhaps projected exceptionally well to all the countries which really mattered. For example, the US, so a look towards the Indo-US strategic relationship, a strategic partnership, coming with the 2+2 talks. That's the foreign minister and the defense minister together, with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense in the United States, the initiation of 2+2 talks with Japan. These are the kind of things, the revolutionary ways by which we started making a difference. Of course, we could not go the whole way with US because of with the US, you have to build up trust. Any of nations like this, you have to build up trust. The period we are looking at from 1991 to 2020 is a very short period. It's a generational change of maybe 1.5 generations. And in 1.5 generations, things change on the ground, but trust doesn't come so easily. Just as I can tell you, the trust that we have lost with China because of Galwan, this trust will not come back for the next 3 generations. I can assure you this. Okay. Then we were looking in foreign relations. We were looking at Russia. Everyone advised the government that you can't leave out Russia because Russia is the most assured source of supply of weapons and ammunition to us, equipment to us. And therefore, you saw in the middle, we went for a $5 billion S-400 deal, which is going to come in very handy to us today, the S-400 deal. 39,000 crore rupee deal was, and it was, of course, the requirement of air defense was very much felt, but to go to Russia and get it from them, I think it was a transformational decision because it actually helped keep our relationship with Russia going. But the most important place where this government made a difference was the Middle East. And they found that's the place where 8 million Indians, the diaspora, now under major threat, $40 billion worth of remittances which come in every year. It was making a huge difference to our economy. And I think Mr. Modi rightly focused on it and went back and forth. The prime countries became Saudi Arabia, UAE, to an extent Qatar, Oman, Israel, of course, right? And I think this has helped us tremendously. Then with Japan, the ASEAN countries, and China. Now in China, a lot of people are accusing the government and Mr. Modi of having trusted China, etc. I explain it in a different way. I explain it that it's making the best use of a situation. China is the source of the world's supply chain, the start point of the world's supply chain. You can't do without it. Today we are fighting it economically on a different plane. I can tell you we are not going whole hog on that. We are doing it to an extent symbolically, right? Much of it probably will come back in the near future. But I think that was the best way of doing things at that time. Partnering economically, taking your trade to $85 billion, of course, a lot of it in favor of China. Ours was only $18 billion of exports, rest of it was all China. But what's helping us maintain a reasonable balance in our relationship, although China was not playing ball diplomatically, politically, strategically with us. It was doing awkward things all the time. At that point, let me just try and explain to you that one of the things why China keeps doing this to you, why China does this on the Himalayan border, why did they do it in Doklam, why did they start doing this in 2011, the walk-in operations in different parts of Eastern Ladakh, why once in a while on Arunachal, why do they raise the issue of Arunachal from time to time, etc. Primarily, as I explained it earlier, China is wary of Indian capability of the Indian Ocean. You have the capability to be able to stop China's trade, or at least act as a major obstacle in that. Its energy, 80% of its energy resources come from the Middle East through these routes of the sea lines of communication. If you want to get bolshy on this, you can stop all this in conjunction with different countries. So this is not something the Chinese would be very happy with. They want to keep your attention focused to the Himalayas. They want to keep your focus of your strategic outlook on the Himalayas, making sure the line of actual control is never demarcated, never delineated. Because if it is not delineated, demarcated, the start point of your negotiations with China on your border issues never comes in. From 1993 till 2020, in 27 years, that start point is still not come. So they keep you there, hoping that you will keep spending a lot of money on your army, you will keep spending a lot of money on the Air Force, you will keep spending, raising a mountain strike corps, etc. I'm not contesting the raising of mountain strike corps or anything like that. But it wants you to make sure that you don't invest sufficient money in your Navy, in the Indian Navy. And he has managed to achieve that to a very great extent. Okay, some other issues on this. Of course, 2014 threw up a much greater nationalist pride. There's no doubt about it. Much greater nationalist pride. Economic constraints, no doubt. We have not had the kind of economic run that we had in the first part of the millennium. The first 10 years of the millennium, we were touching 9% growth at that time, but then the international environment was conducive to it. We weathered the 2008 meltdown, the United States meltdown, the international banking meltdown. We weathered it extremely well. But after 2014, we've had a problem with energy prices. In the beginning, no, later on with energy prices. And a downturn on the international economy. We were still not doing too badly. 6.5% growth was still there. We came down to over 4.8% growth, but we are going to be hit this year very, very badly. Multiple programs of social welfare I've already spoken about. Pakistan, of course, I've just mentioned that handling Uri, handling Pulwama, and then the 5th of August decisions, 3 events actually have put Pakistan so badly on the back foot that actually it has led to a situation where Pakistan's options were running out or have run out. And therefore, what you should expect is a greater collusion between Pakistan and China. And I'm willing to explain this to a greater extent if someone wishes. But to my mind, today is a situation where Pakistan may not require China so much as China requires Pakistan. Because if China intends to do awkward things on the line of actual control and it wants to set the narrative for the post-pandemic world, then it needs the support of, if what it is doing in Ladakh at the moment, it definitely needs greater support from Pakistan. So having said that, let me finish with 2014-20, and much of where we are has already been covered in the 5 minutes or 7 minutes that I've got left. Let me cover in only point form, the post-pandemic. We are in the middle of the pandemic. We have still not reached the post-pandemic. What you should remember is the international security environment in the post-pandemic world. The perception prevails that the United States and its allies have all weakened. There is nothing to confirm it. Western Europe may have weakened, the UK and Britain may have weakened, but the United States, to my mind, will probably bounce back. It's a lot of questions today being asked as to whether Trump will return or not. What will be the post-November situation in the United States? I foresee the rise of President Biden, Joe Biden, and today I think Trump is almost 11 points behind him in approval ratings. What has happened is that the Middle East has suddenly found itself going out of focus. Terror has receded. Global war on terrorism has receded. Afghanistan is suddenly down to an extent. Also, terror activities in Afghanistan are still very much on. The Americans are no longer talking so much about the final pullout from there. There is a new world order, a new balance of power which will emerge. And what is going to classically happen is that the attention of the world will shift from Europe, Middle East, Afghanistan, AFPAC to the Indo-Pacific region, South China Sea. Everything east of Delhi. If you stand in Delhi and look west, the west will become comparatively are less important, and everything east of Delhi will become that much more strategically important. That's the best way to explain it, I think. So the new world order, which it takes many years to emerge, some of it is structured, some of it is unstructured, it just appears by itself. There are nations which try and force a new world order. A balance of power is attempting to be created. China has opened up too many fronts. It's opened up just too many fronts. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, the United States. And there are two destroyers today, two aircraft carriers of the United States today in the South China Sea. Two carrier groups, two of the biggest carrier groups, the Ronald Reagan and the Nimitz, two of them which are today stationed. Not stationed, they're sailing, carrying out what are called FONOPs, freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea. So this is something which is going to be an order of the day, freedom of navigation. There will be a lot of emphasis on environment and energy, and a lot of emphasis on medical management of the world, future pandemics, etc. And of course, economics will set the stage. You may want to do a lot of things in the new world order, but nothing will happen unless you can have the economy going properly. So India, from a security and diplomatic point of view, the challenge of China will be one of the major things. Remember, China has set itself 2049, 2035, 2022, three milestones for itself to achieve its greatness. And I think Xi Jinping is attempting to advance those milestones. He wants to do all what he wants to do in his own lifetime. Otherwise, this is supposed to be in continuity. Xi Jinping is looking at it in his own lifetime. And that's going to be a major challenge for India. You may find India will maybe forced to look at the United States, although we have moved more steadily into the US camp. But I think this experience with what is happening with China is still not ended at the moment. Will continue, and India will be pushed for various reasons, economic and military reasons in particular, into the camp of the United States with Japan, with Australia, and I think the Quad is something which is in the making in the future. Because remember, you may be able to put together your army, your air force even in a faster time frame, but the Navy takes a fairly long time, a very, very expensive thing to get your maritime capability moved up. Politically, India will have a strong center, although a frittered polity will continue. We are fortunate if we've got a stable leadership, and that I foresee will continue for quite some time. We are not going to be in that mode of China or Russia, where you got permanent leaders till 2036 or lifetime leaders and things like that. Social issues are some of the major things which will happen in India. The urban-rural divide and this migrants issue has caused us a major turbulence in India. This is going to be one of the issues which will be at the center of all concerns. Health. We have realized we have invested a lot in national security in terms of your defense capability. We've invested a lot in infrastructure, etc. Now is the time when we will have to start investing a lot in our health infrastructure. We have not done sufficiently, and this pandemic is going to give us the major reasons for it. Education, much more. And I think this particular thing of online education is going to really take off in a very, very big way to bring this online education to lower segments of society, less empowered segments of society. And one of the major challenges will, of course, be internal stability. Ideology. This is going to be the major challenge for us. That sometimes the nationalist fervor in the country can actually get negative, and it can cause a tremendous amount of instability within the country, which your neighbors, your enemies can adversely exploit against you. Technology. With the youth aspirations going up, technology, robotics, in fact, IT itself, you can't lose your edge as being one of the leading information technology nations of the world. Defense technology, space, cyber. Cyber is going to be, again, on the defense front, one of the major issues. So these are the aspects of technology which we will have to get into in a very big way. Also, the cleanup of the environment, which is also a technological thing, actually. The cleanup of the environment, healthier air, cleaner air. These are issues which we don't look at enough. Is going to be a major challenge for us in the future. Economically, higher defense expenditure can be expected, not automatically. We are down to 1.5%, and in a hurry, we are now investing a lot of money suddenly. I hope a change of mindsets will take place, and we will be able to convince the leadership that a higher defense expenditure only ensures that you have much lower expenditure at a time when emergency emerges in front of you. Your dilution of your traditional contributors like IT will definitely come down for a temporary period of time. Tourism, expatriate remittances, things like that. So the economics will have to undergo a major turbulence. You'll have to start looking at fresh areas into which your remittance, your investments can be brought to bear. Energy, major problem. We are looking at a situation at the moment where oil is $38 today. We only hope that this fluctuation doesn't continue. At the moment, we are happy that this much. The government may have raised prices of oil for different reasons, petrol and diesel for different reasons. But anything going above $45 will hit the economy in a very, very big way. So you're going to find a lot of new economic alliances which will emerge in the world, and this is going to be a world of entrepreneurship. So people who are coming out from IITs, etc., these are the people who are going to be the future leaders. As MSMEs are going to be the future. And this is where you'll find a tremendous investment of effort and money in the future. I'm coming to the last points, absolutely to the last. Purely concerning the security of India related to the military aspects, theatre commands. Do we expect that theatre commands will come up in the near future? To my mind, it's going to take longer. It's not something you can do overnight in a 3 years' time to achieve the theaterization concept completely. What has happened with China at the moment, it may either trigger or spurt a quicker approach to theaterization, or it may actually put it back. A naval revamp is definitely on the cards. Our maritime capability is definitely on the cards. Deterrence against China, the continuation of the raising of the Mountain Strike Corps, I don't think that will happen. I think we'll come down to having more smaller size formations. The IBG concept, which is being looked at more seriously in India, I think the Mountain Strike Corps will probably just look at the one division it has got under its command, and probably we will look at taking under command another division from whichever area it is intending to be employed. A big fillip to strategic culture through online programs of this nature. I'm hoping that this will happen, and India's aspirations for a permanent seat on the UNSC, I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but that aspiration must continue, and hopefully one day it will be achieved. I'm only looking that a national defense university must come up in the next couple of years, because if you're looking at enhancing our national strategic culture, then without a national defense university and many more such institutions, think tanks are proliferating all over India. Many more such organizations, institutions must come up. I'm finding a tremendous amount of interest being taken by the IIMs and IITs in national security these days, and that actually augurs extremely well. So if I have to sum up, I would say when I look at the future, the aspect of national security oriented approach towards the future of India, we must adopt the lessons learned approach of management. At all times, we cannot forget what's gone behind us, which is why it took such a long time to bring to you from 1947 till 1989, 1992, because unless you have the backdrop of your failures, you can hardly make strides ahead. So the lessons learned approach of governance and future governance is very important. The enhancement of India's strategic culture, and all of you will make a difference in that. Economic revival post the pandemic. It will happen. But there will be new avenues which will have to be found, which will make major contributions to the economy. Managing China and Pakistan, I think this is going to be one of our biggest challenges. Pakistan is not going to keep sitting quiet with what you've achieved in Jammu and Kashmir. And neither the Chinese, don't think that this Chinese withdrawal, so-called withdrawal, which is taking place is actually is anything very serious actually. Approach to the Cold War, there's a likely Cold War between the United States and China. Are we going to put all our eggs into the basket with the United States? Can we revive our relationship with China after what's happened in Galwan, etc.? I would say you follow the principle of there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. there are always permanent interests. As long as your national interest is served by having a relationship with a country, you can always put off whatever has happened in the past. See what happened between Japan and the United States. See what happened between Germany, France, and the UK. So these things are always of the past. And lifting people from poverty, technological investment in research and development. This is something we have been very, very weak at. Our investment in research, particularly in R&D, entrepreneurship. We have to catch up with China. We have to catch up. You can't allow a yawning gap of asymmetry existing between India and China. And lastly, I think we will have to invest over time a hell of a lot of resources in health and environment. All this put together, hopefully, will make India a very resilient, progressive, united, very strong nation, which can look up to the world and be a model for the world, not as an aggressive nation looking at others' land or territories, but as a model for the world to look at as to how a modern nation must emerge. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. That was indeed very insightful, and I'm pretty sure that exposure of NCC cadets and youth to such a broad outlook will definitely set and give them a different perception